Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Holier podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Smith. And today I sit down with Justin Woodbury. Justin and I go way back to our days in the Christian school. And he was pulled out of Christian school a couple of years after I was there with him. And I find out why. And he later writes a book about his experiences in the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, specifically Ann Arbor Baptist Church in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I can't wait for you guys to hear his story, but I want to give you guys a little warning. This may be triggering as it does deal with abuse within the church. So if you have children, please listen to this without them. Again, thank you guys for being here and for supporting this podcast. Please like and subscribe this episode so that we can push this out into the algorithm and get survivor stories out. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Let's get started. Hey, Justin, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks so much, Jennifer.
Yeah, it's so awesome that we were able to reconnect after all this time. For those of you that are listening that don't know, Justin and I actually went to the same Christian school, and he was a little bit younger than me. Unfortunately, I hate to say that. At my
We're both
age,
still
I'm like,
young,
oh
though.
my gosh, everyone's younger than me. I'm like the oldest person in the room now at this point, almost always. But that's okay. We grew up together in the Christian school, and we recently reconnected online. You found the podcast. How did you find the podcast, by the way?
That's a really good question. I don't remember. I think I was just scrolling through Facebook and it popped up, and I'm like, I know
cool.
her. And then, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that I'm in the algorithm somewhere.
You are. Yeah. Someone shared it and it came up, and I was like, Unholier than thou. Like, that's such a great name. And a good name is when the title tells you everything you need to know about the podcast. And so I was like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I do love the name. There's one other podcast has the same name, and I'm like, could you just please go away? Like, you haven't posted in like 4 years. Just go away.
Yeah.
So,
That's
but
funny.
we love the name as well. And, it's just that I always say, like, for those that don't know the saying, holier than thou, it's people that have sort of set themselves up on this pedestal. And when you really pull back the curtain, as I say, and see who they really are, they're actually unholier than thou.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what we're doing here. Like, this podcast is exposing various cults and religious institutions, and of course the troubled teen industry. And we're talking to survivors and people who are witness to the abuse within these institutions. And so we really want to highlight survivors and expose the abuse that's going on. So yeah, unholier than thou. I do love the name. I have to say,
Such a good name. Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, this is super exciting. So for those who don't know you, Justin, could you give us a little introduction as to who you are, kind of how you were raised, maybe just go from there, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I attended a church, Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, where I would say that there were a lot of IFB churches, including the school that we went to. I think your dad was a pastor of IFB, but even the other IFB churches called our church a cult because of how strict we were. And I mean, I know we'll get into it, but you talk about unholier than thou. I mean, some of the worst stuff you can imagine happened within that environment. But born and raised there, moved from Michigan after working for that same church after I got out of college, moved from Michigan to Denver, Colorado, and met my wife. And so now, 15 years later, I'm 45 and still living in Colorado, married with 2 beautiful kids and loving life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you escaped the cult.
Yes.
That's good. So we'll definitely get into that, because I'm going to want to know like the journey and how you got out as well. But let's just pause here for a second and note that you were only 1 year younger than me, so not too bad.
Yeah. You were, yeah. I think when I left Faithway, I was in 9th grade and you were in 10th, going to 11th. I was going into 10th. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So I don't feel so bad.
No. Yeah,
I don't
no,
know. David likes to remind me of my age quite often, and he's also a year younger than me, but he makes
that's
it
really
seem
funny.
like we're 2 decades apart from each other.
Yeah, no, yeah. We're still young. Age is what they
Yeah.
say, age is a state of mind. So,
Right,
uh,
exactly. I
yeah,
know we're still young in
yeah,
our minds. It's all good.
absolutely.
But so tell us a little bit about Ann Arbor Baptist. You does it still exist, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. So you were raised in that church from the time you were how old to how old?
I mean, from the time I was born, I mean, I'm sure even a couple of weeks after I was born, I was in the nursery up until I left in 2010 when I was 30.
Oh,
So 30
wow.
years. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Okay. So talk about your experience at the church. You said that
Yeah.
even in IFB terms, it was more culty than the cult.
Yeah.
Explain what you mean by that. Give us some examples.
Yeah. So our pastor was a what they would call first generation Christian, and he wanted to do everything opposite than the way he was grown up with. So he figured if there's like sex, drugs, and rock and roll in how he grew up, like how could he be the most opposite of that and follow this holiness, like a holier than thou? Like literally, we used to talk about that.
Mhm.
And so he put it into to practice very strict standards. So, we there were many couple of families that did not have a TV. They didn't listen to the radio. We didn't watch movies. We didn't go to the movies. We didn't believe in dating. We used to joke around that don't ever have sex because it could lead to dancing, because that's how bad dancing was. Like dancing was so bad.
Oh, wow.
We used to. It was kind of like a just behind the scenes joke that we used to joke about. But no, don't dancing, no dating. We didn't go to the movie theater. Definitely no drinking, smoking. Women had to wear long dresses. When I left, so I was the music director in that church. When I left, I was going to have to enforce a dress standard for on and off platform. So whether you were in the choir or out on vacation, that included the length of women's hair, how they could style it, what type of makeup they could wear, the color of their fingernail polish, the length of their dresses, like all this different stuff.
Mm.
Of course, women were taught unquestionable obedience to their husbands. Children were taught unquestionable obedience to their parents. And then families were taught unquestionable obedience to the pastor. So
Mm.
when I say strict, I mean, I have not ever known of a more strict IFB culture than the one I grew up. Because I remember even going to Faithway, and some of the kids in my class and probably even in your class were like, man, your church is so like ridiculous.
Yeah. So as you're kind of checking off the boxes, in my mind, I'm doing the same thing. I'm like, yep. And then you sort of lost me in the part where you're like telling women what kind of nail polish they can wear, how their hair has to be,
Hmm.
how much makeup they're allowed to wear. Now, I knew people in the IFB who had to deal with that, but it
Yeah.
was more or less like within their own home, like the husband and father had set those standards
Yep.
up for their
Yes.
family,
Hmm.
not necessarily the pastor. However, I don't know if you are familiar with Don Green. He was the pastor of Parker Memorial Baptist Church in Lansing. He
Hmm.
was one of the strictest IFB pastors that I've ever heard of. And he just happened to be my ex-husband's grandfather.
Okay.
So
All right.
I married into that family, and so he went as so far to say that wire rimmed glasses were not allowed in his church because John Lennon apparently made them popular in the 60s
Sure.
and 70s with the Beatles. I'm like, I recall like when glasses were invented way long before John Lennon even walked the planet, they
Yes.
were all wire rimmed. They didn't have
Hmm.
acrylic lenses or plastic lenses back then. They had wire rimmed
Yes.
glasses.
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and say that Ben Franklin maybe made them popular. I don't,
Yeah.
but it's that
Yeah.
extreme that it's like there's no biblical stance for any of those things. It was just pulled out of their rear end to say, like, this is
Absolutely.
some form of control that we're going to do. And it mostly had to do with women and girls.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that's another interesting point, Jennifer, because we didn't associate with other churches, so I had never heard of that name. I mean, I knew your family through Faithway, but besides Faithway and Ann Arbor Baptist, we didn't really know about a whole lot of other churches. So yeah, there could have been plenty of churches that had that crazy stuff going on, and I wouldn't have known about it. But yeah, the wire rim glasses, we weren't allowed to like anything other than a comb over for guys. We weren't allowed to have Skechers shoes we weren't allowed to wear, and I can't remember why.
Why?
I don't remember. I think it was associated with the skateboarding thing,
Oh,
and it
wow.
was
Okay.
rebellious or something. But to your point, it was, I would say, 95% geared towards women and controlling women. And yeah,
Yeah. So, as a kid growing up in this environment, did you ever have moments where you questioned and you were like, this isn't actually in the Bible? Why are we doing this? You didn't.
never.
Okay.
Not, I mean, not until I was 18, 19, 20, and then I went to a cult college, and that all of it was reinforced. So yeah, no, I did not.
Okay. Now I'm very interested in what college you went to.
Oh, you probably have never heard of it. It was called Baptist College of Ministry in Wisconsin, Menominee Falls, Wisconsin.
No, I've never heard of that.
So Joy Van Gelderen married my pastor and
Okay.
became Joy Hirth, but the Van Gelderen family was a family out of, I guess, originally out of Illinois, and then they went throughout. But the oldest son, Wayne, was a pastor, and he started that college. Let me think for a second. He started that college in 1997 because he believed in 1997 that Bob Jones University was going liberal. And so he wanted to start a college because his daughter was graduating. And so they started that college. So you can imagine a college that had rules that were stricter than a Bob Jones because they thought Bob Jones was going liberal.
Which is funny because I went to Bob Jones.
Did you? Yeah,
I did. And you know what? I do know some IFB preachers that thought that Bob Jones was going liberal at the time as well. In fact, I bring this up on another episode that when I was there, I believe it was my freshman year. And we're not getting into politics. I'm just going to tell you what happened. This is just an actual fact that happened. So the president, campaigning had started
oh
for
yeah, yeah,
president,
yep.
and so they had various candidates through, and they had George Bush Jr. come through with his wife Laura, and that was all over the news. It was
I
like,
remember.
do you remember
Oh,
that?
absolutely, yeah. It
Okay.
was huge.
Yeah, so he came through, and then all of a sudden they started saying that the school was like racist and we were all bigots. I didn't even know what the word bigot meant. I'm like, what does this even mean? We had another candidate through. He was a black gentleman who was running for president. His name was Alan Keyes. And so
I remember
he,
that too, yeah.
yeah, so he came through and he actually came onto the platform and started giving like his speech to the student body. And I remember we called him Three Sticks. It's Bob Jones the Third. He was there. We always call him Three Sticks.
That's funny.
He was there, and the faculty was there, and all of a sudden, Alan Key's speech sort of turned and did a 180, and he started calling all of us racist and bigots and all of this stuff from the podium. And then there was like maybe 15, 10 people in the whole student body in the auditorium. And that place, I would bet you that place seats like 8 or 10,000 people, and it was packed. And there was maybe 10 or 15 people that stood up and gave him a standing ovation, and everyone else was just sitting there like, we just got yelled at by this guy, and he walked off the stage. And I didn't have a
Oh,
clue as to what was going on. I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't even know what just happened. And it was just a very abrupt ending to the speech. And then I later found out, because it was all over the media, that the whole thing was about not being able to have interracial dating on the campus.
Yes.
So you couldn't, a white person could not date a black person,
Yes.
and vice versa. And but like a white person could date an Asian
Yeah,
person
yep.
or a Hispanic person. This is what it never made sense to me. Even in the IFB churches, it was like that. It's
Hmm.
like, okay, make it make sense to me because, and then looking back, I was never exposed to racism because right in our church, it was like 99.9% white people.
Yeah.
We had the occasional black person come
Yeah.
through.
Yep.
We had a couple that came from St. Thomas Virgin Islands, and they were
Yep.
there for a few years. And so we had the occasional black family come through, and we were all very welcoming and never treated them any differently. But racism was never like in my purview at all. Like I just didn't
Wow.
know about it because I was never exposed to any of that. So when he's up there calling us racist and bigots, I'm like, what does this even mean? What is this even about? What are we doing? Like, and then it became this national news story. And then Bob Jones started allowing permission via the parents on both sides to
Hmm.
allow for interracial dating. You had to get written permission by the parents of each side, which in a lot of IFB churches then deemed Bob Jones
Yep.
as going liberal.
Yep.
So just so people understand, like when they say liberal, they don't mean like Bob Jones University is now promoting like same-sex marriage and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
pro-choice
Yeah.
agenda and all of this stuff. They're just literally saying you can date who you want with your
With
parents'
permission.
permission. And so that's making them liberal.
Oh my gosh. That's so ridiculous. Yeah.
It really is.
It- yeah. No, that is just, I remember that. And I think I remember that was part of the reason why the pastor did start the college because of, yeah, it's like, oh, you start letting it slip. It's just, compromise is a slippery slope is what they
Yeah.
would always say. And,
Yeah. He didn't want his daughter dating some like interracial
yes, yes.
man. That's what it really was. In his head, he was probably like, if I let my daughter go to Bob Jones University, she's going to date a black guy.
Yep.
He's so
Probably,
stupid. Yeah.
probably. I was the first time I ever heard the N word was by an evangelist that went through our church and used it in a joke when they were over our family's house one year. Um,
Wow. Who was
eh,
it?
I shouldn't say. I,
You shouldn't say?
I shouldn't know because he's still
Oh,
actually a kind of a friend.
okay. Still. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't think. Yeah,
Okay. So
I could
that's
tell you. I
fine.
could tell you offline.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
And I can tell you, like, I just the episode that I just did with David. I had a clip. We did preacher clips, and we did like reactions in real time. And I had Ruckman as one of my clips, and he says the N word. I mean, that's how I was introduced to N word. I mean, he said it all the time, and he would preach our youth conferences and youth camps all the time. He would say the slang for gay person, the F
Yep,
word,
yep,
and then
yep.
he would say the N word, and
Oh,
he would just constantly. I mean, it was like just roll right off his tongue like no big deal. So that's how we were exposed to those words. We
yeah, that
otherwise didn't hear them.
that's terrible. And it was never said from the pulpit, but it was just said in a very off-color joke that was completely inappropriate. But I was like 5, 6, 7 years old. I was also taught because it's interesting. You said you were never exposed to racism. I didn't feel like I was exposed to racism either until years later. I was like, oh my God, that's racism. That's racist. But we were taught the curse of Ham. And I don't know if
Yes,
you're right.
same. Yes,
And so my
and
pastor was
oh
like, it's not racist, it's just biblical.
yeah, and Cain. Have you heard that one too?
No.
Where Cain,
Oh, yes.
yeah, so they say that the mark that God put on Cain was that he made him black. And so
Oh,
his whole race is, and that's also a Mormon belief, by the way.
I
That's
did not know
also a
that.
Mormon belief.
So yeah, so our pastor taught that it was Ham that was black, but one of them was like, yeah, no, they're cursed. We're not being racist, but black people are cursed, so that's the way it is. That's why they, you know, can't wait date white people, and that's why all this other stuff. So I just grew up years thinking, why are you saying I'm racist? I'm not. It's just that's the way God made it. So don't, yeah.
Yeah, that's how we were conditioned. And that's why I try to tell people they're like the IFB is not a cult. It's a cult. You have
Hmm.
brainwashed generations of people into thinking that something that is clearly racist
Yep.
isn't racist.
Yeah.
And like children are being taught this. And so you
Yep.
grow up and you're like, well, I'm not a racist. I would never hurt a black person or whatever. But how your thinking does, like
Yep.
the way
Yep.
that you look at a person and say, like, well, they're like basically not even human. I mean, that's pretty
Yep.
much what it's saying.
Yep.
Almost like they're the spawn of Satan or something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you have to preface a conversation with about racist, like sexual orientation or anything with, I treat them just like any other normal person, you're racist. Like if that's the way you have to preface it. I had a relative a couple of years ago say, no, I know a lesbian, a lady at our work, and I treat her just like a normal person. Like she's a
She
normal
is a normal
person.
person. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, you said that there was never really a time in your childhood where you were like, this is the cult, or I question this authority or these rules that are being implemented on us until you were like 18 or so, and
Hmm.
you got into college. Was there something that happened in college that was like the point where you start to question? Was there an incident or was it just like a teaching?
Yeah, this is so ridiculous, but I guess it was my junior year of college. My sister met a guy at our college and they won. So I guess when I say 18, it was probably more like when I was out of college, 23, 24. And my sister met, Shannon. Yes, she met
Mhm.
a guy from the college. They moved out to Colorado and started attending a church out there. And I think it was a picture we saw on social media or something where my sister was wearing pants.
Mm.
And, we were devastated because we were like, man, she just like walked away from her convictions and everything. And again, to the average listener, this probably sounds so dumb, but this is where we were at. And so I went out and I visited the church and come to find out I knew the same people who attended that church and they were good people. Like just and I would say that church was a cult too.
Mm.
But back then, I was like, man, just because they're wearing pants doesn't mean God can't bless them, is the conclusion I came to. And that was my form of questioning it. So it wasn't even is wearing dresses right or wrong. It was like people can be wrong and God still can love them. So
Mhm.
when I say
Yeah.
question, it was that. I guess it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I very seriously started questioning all that.
Okay. So it's funny that you mentioned the pants thing on social media because I had Christiana Miller on a couple episodes ago, and she was saying that a similar thing had happened to her where she had posted herself in an outfit on social media that wasn't IFB approved. And so it started a firestorm, really. And she was shunned and lost a lot of friends over it. And that was sort of an eye-opening moment for her as well. And it's the sad thing for me is like really what it comes down to is the way we were raised is
Hmm.
super super judgmental. And I try to tell I have a lot of atheist friends now
Hmm.
and people that even came out of the IFB
Yes.
who are atheists, including my brother, by the way.
Josh.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know if, yeah.
Yeah, so he considers himself more like agnostic
Yeah.
atheist. So but we've had these conversations where it's like you're taught this stuff and a lot of it isn't based on any biblical principle at all. It's just a source of control, and then you're taught like to judge other people. Maybe not, maybe the pastor doesn't say like you need to judge these people. He might not say that verbatim from the pulpit, but the way that they're teaching us and conditioning us is to judge other people
Yes.
like by proxy. And
Yes.
so you just do,
Yes.
and then you get out and you start, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I did, where I started like studying Christ and like looking at who he was as a person, and I'm like, this is like the opposite of what we were taught. Why
Yes.
weren't we taught this?
Yes.
And
Yes.
the thing that I struggle with, and I talked to my friend David about this, who is an atheist, is I struggle with the fact that like the church taught us so much about God in the Old Testament, And it was like he kills whole civilizations like this,
Yes.
like nothing.
Yes.
And like poof, they're gone. And
Yes.
he judges people, and he allowed Satan to play around with Job like it was just some
Yes.
toy to play with. Like I struggle with that. And then I
Yes.
look at Christ in the New Testament and I'm like, he's the literal opposite persona of that guy over there. And so and then you're told like Jesus is God and God is Jesus and God never changes. And it's like, well, how could this person or persona over here be the same as this one who loves people unconditionally,
Yes.
who doesn't judge? The only people he judged were the church people.
Yeah.
Like he
Yeah.
called them vipers and
Yes.
hypocrites and
Yeah.
all of these things. And it's like that's the part I struggle with. I don't know if you do as well, but like I still
Yes.
try and figure that out. I'm like, make it make sense.
100%. Yeah. The only people in the, like you said, in the New Testament were the holier than thous that he judged, and everyone else he was compassionate on and friends with. And no, my wife and I, she grew up in another church in Illinois that was an IFB, and we've had those conversations, late night conversations, so many times. And I'll probably get to this later on in my story, but we had a situation happen a few years into our marriage that showed us how much we were judgmental. Like, we were the biggest judgmental assholes of anybody that we knew. And
Mm,
it's changed. We've changed so much since then because of something that happened. But I mean, you are conditioned to that because I think it was because holiness, even though God is love, God is mercy, God is holy, whatever, we were taught by my pastor that holiness was the primary attribute of God. And so everything else came under. Yeah, he might be loving, but his love can never contradict his holiness. And
mhm,
so the destruction, the everything was because it was judged through the lens of holiness. And if it's not holy, it's not good. I
mhm.
think that's why I felt people of different backgrounds and different thoughts and beliefs and stuff. It's like, well, that's unholy, so you're going to hell.
Yeah, and it really sets you up as you being better than everyone else, right? In your
Yes,
own mind.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what it really comes down to in the IFB in particular. Just because we can talk to experience, right? With the IFB, I know there's other cults that are like this as well, but when it comes down to it, they're essentially saying we're better than you all. That's the bottom line, and
Yeah.
that's not Christ-like at all.
Yeah. No.
It's like, what
It's
Bible are
the
you reading?
opposite. Yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah. So you had mentioned earlier on that your pastor was a first generation Christian.
Yeah.
Now, for those who are listening who are like, what the heck does that even
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
We can explain that. It's basically somebody who wasn't raised a Christian. They became a Christian later on in life. And I don't know if you've noticed this, Justin, but I noticed this in my dad's own church through people who came in as first generation Christians. They are more extreme and dogmatic
Yes.
than the people who have been like
Yes.
generations in Christianity. So we actually had a youth director. He was the youth director when I was there, junior high and a little bit of my high school years. And he was a first generation Christian, converted from Catholicism. And was very dogmatic and very extreme and brought in a lot of those ideologies that you speak about where
Yes.
we were a little bit more relaxed in my dad's church because my
Yes.
dad didn't really care. It was more IFB light. The only
Yes.
thing he wasn't light on was the KJV, the King James Bible.
Oh
He
yeah.
wasn't going to budge on that at
Yeah.
all. That was a non-negotiable, but he
Yeah.
didn't really care about women wearing pants. He never once preached about it from the pulpit. We had a TV in our home. He didn't care if you had a TV or didn't have a TV. Like those things weren't preached from the pulpit out of my dad's mouth. But there were some of these first generation Christians that started coming in that were then implementing that to the youth department. And it was like, you better do this or you're a Jezebel. You better do
Yes.
that or and so then that's really when I experienced a lot of the religious trauma that I did.
Hmm.
And I've said this before, and you can probably attest to this. Like, you didn't even realize you were being traumatized at the time because this was the norm. And then when you got out, started deconstructing, you're like, holy cow. Like, I cannot believe, like, even just the subject of the rapture, right? I
Yeah.
was more
Yeah.
scared of the rapture than I was of hell.
Yes.
It was terrifying to me. And anytime I heard, a train go by or anything, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the rapture. You
Yes.
hear something and you're like, oh my gosh, it's the rapture. And like every day you're thinking, I got to think about the rapture because if I think about it, then God won't come because it says that it's going to
It's
happen
imminent.
in our world.
Yes.
Did you ever have those moments
Oh
or
my
you're like,
God. Yes. Yes. No, in fact, I was a more afraid. I got saved so many times, like prayed the prayer like so many times at night, not because I was afraid of hell, but because I was afraid of the rapture and being on
yeah,
the wrong side.
yeah, I know. Did you guys ever have Peter Ruckman at your church or know about Peter Ruckman or was
I
he?
know about Peter
Okay.
Ruckman. We never had him at our church because
Okay.
we would not say that we were King James only. They would say we're not King James only. We only use the King James, but they are King James only. They just, for some reason, they had this weird, yeah,
Because that would make them a cult, right? Because that
yeah,
was
right,
a
yeah,
two
yeah, yeah,
extreme.
yeah. I mean, they wouldn't let anyone use any other Bible but the King James. But for some reason, they just, our pastor would say he's not. We're not King James only. We just only use the King
Oh,
James, which is so
okay,
dumb.
great.
But that's what, yeah,
Yeah, that's super interesting. So when you were at that church and then you were also at Faithway, the Christian school,
yeah.
was there ever a time where you were like, this school's liberal?
Oh, I mean, that's why my mom pulled me out in ninth grade is because
What?
oh yeah, she thought that I was changing, and she thought that it was because of the friends I was hanging around with, and so she pulled me
Okay.
out because she didn't think the school was strong enough to keep me from, she wanted me to go to the direction of being in the ministry, and she was feeling like I was being pulled a different direction by the school and by the friends.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So your dad wasn't involved in that decision, was he?
He supported it, but it was more driven by my mom.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me because of the hierarchy that's set up in the IFB
Yeah.
where like the father is more the leader of the home. Was it different in your household?
Yeah. No, I would say as strict as the church we went to was, like my parents were black sheep in that area. My dad did not crack the whip and really come down on my mom. They had much more of an equal say in things and made equal decisions. I mean, I'm not saying it was perfect, but I think they were probably the most balanced family or
Hmm.
couple in the church when it came to that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's good
Yeah.
compared to most people in the IFB. It's definitely not like that. That's not the norm. But
Yeah. No. Yeah.
so you were being influenced by some of your friends at the Christian school, and she saw a change in you. Specifically, did she give any examples, or she just thought that you were maybe starting to question things, or?
She sensed it. So we were homeschooled until, I mean, I went to Faithway K5, first grade, second grade, third grade, and then we were taken out fourth, fifth, and sixth. So when I went back, it was seventh grade. And, it's just this weird thing. I came back as a junior hire. My mom bought me all new clothes 2 weeks before, and within 2 weeks, I grew a couple of inches. So I came back to Faithway wearing tight pants that were really short. And I was teased by all the kids, and I deserved it. I mean, I was just this nerdy, geeky kid. And so for 2 years, seventh and eighth, I was just really teased. And at the end of eighth grade, I don't know, was it Mrs. Urgino in English class or something? I said something really mean to her, and the kids thought it was really funny, and I instantly became popular. And then in ninth grade, I hung out with all Ben and Brian and Charlie, like all those cool kids, and we were all this. I really was starting to love school, and I
Mhm.
think my mom sensed that and was like, "I need you to come out of that," because it was not the direction she wanted saw me going. But it was nothing bad. I mean, you know what? We just like to hang around and have fun and do kid stuff. Like, yeah,
Yeah, I know. Isn't it crazy though? Like my husband wasn't raised in any kind of religion whatsoever. And so he's got all kinds of stories growing up of how he'd get in trouble and how, all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't do any of that. And he's like, oh, come on, you had to have done something, and I'm like, "Hmm." I'm like, yeah, this one time at youth camp. And he's like, what? I'm like, yeah, this one time at youth camp, me and two of my girlfriends, we decided that we wanted to take showers instead of go to this like Bible study thing we had to do, and we got in trouble. And we weren't allowed to do any of the activities after the evening service at night. And he's like, that's what you did?
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. Yes.
Yep.
And we were looked at as like the rebellious teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember my ninth grade year at Camp Kobiak. I sneaked out with Charlie Jackson and Mendy Morford down by the gym, and we hung out. Literally, that's all we did. We just met up and we're like, "Hey, this is fun," and then we went back to our rooms, and that was it. That was probably the worst thing I ever did at a school camp.
Wow. I know. You're such a rebel.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah.
It
But
is crazy. And I think now it's like you have kids, I have kids, and you're like, man, if that's the trouble that our kids get into when they're teenagers, thank you, Jesus. Like
yes.
that is amazing.
Yes. Yeah. And crazy about all of that too to me is that in that type of kind of like sheltered environment, we were told that you'll be protected from anything bad that happens in the world. And I do think, when it comes to the first generation Christians, I do think that my parents, probably my pastor, they were sincere. They were sincerely wrong in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
but I don't think they were trying to make my life and other people's lives miserable. I think they truly felt like if we can be so opposite of how we grew up and be so opposite of the world, like how far can we take that? I think they meant well at the
Mhm.
beginning, at least, but
Sure.
nothing could be further from the truth when it came to bad stuff happening right within that sheltered environment. Like it didn't protect anyone from anything. It truly
Mhm.
didn't. Everything in our, and I don't know about your experience, but in our church, the worst types of things happened to the kids and to the teens.
So I do not know and am not aware of any abuse happening in my dad's church. The only things that I'm aware of that happened in my dad's church was a deacon had an affair with another deacon's wife and
Hmm.
came in drunk one night to a revival meeting and confessed it all. Um, things like that. And like we had a few teens in the youth department get pregnant before they graduated high school. But as far as abuse in the church, we didn't. As far as I'm aware, we didn't have any of that in our church, thank God. But
Yeah.
I know many, many, many of the people that I talk to have experienced that. So, I mean, you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but were you aware at the time of any abuse going on in your church?
Not at the time, no. So I didn't find out. So, and I can go into as much detail as you want, but I wrote a book about abuse, about sexual abuse that happened to me
Hmm.
it started when I was 13, and it culminated when I was a junior in high school when I was 17. So all while I was a minor, and I lived in this pattern of shame for years and years and years till I met my wife, and she was the first person to ever say, because I told her before we got engaged, I have to confess something in my past. Now, I was still in my late 20s, so I still believed a lot of that stuff, but I said I have to confess some stuff in my past. And so I told her about what had happened and the fact that I hadn't been a Joseph with this particular situation. And we might have to explain what that means, but she was the first person that actually ever said, You were a victim." And
Right.
that was like I think the moment of healing for me. But a couple of years later, I started writing a book because I wanted to tell my story. And it wasn't until I started writing my book that kids from the church started writing me and telling me Jennifer's like some terrifying, unbelievable, sad things that had happened, like sexual abuse and physical abuse and incest and like
Oh my
all
God.
sorts of stuff. Like I almost stopped writing my book because I was like, man, my story pales in comparison to some of these other stories. Like it was, and it was a lot. It wasn't just one or two. I mean, it was unbelievable stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
All at the same church.
All at the, yep, Ann Arbor Baptist Church. All, I mean, it wasn't happening all at the same time, but throughout the years, I mean, there's constantly stuff going on. And not the normal stuff either. Like to me, like teens getting pregnant in a youth group, like it might put them off to a bad start in life and stuff, but that's more normal than any of the stuff that was going on, if that makes sense.
Well, of course, if you're comfortable, could you give some
Yeah.
examples of what was
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah. I mean, and if I told you the names, they were some of our elementary teachers that were involved, or families and stuff. So again, offline, and I don't even mind telling you the one name because I made a big post about it. But no, I mean, there was fathers molesting their daughters. There was there was cousins molesting cousins. My situation was with my mom's best friend that I can get into more detail on, but there was that situation. There was parents physically abusing their kids to the point of like beating them till they were bloody. Um, there was animal cruelty, like just really sick, twisted
Mm-hmm.
thing. You know what I mean? Like just
Yeah.
whatever you can think of, like take it to the worst degree, and that's what was going on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a
So
lot.
the one thing I'll say, because like I said, I put a post on it several years ago, but I don't know if you remember Chuck Haskell and Pam Haskell and their family. For years, he was molesting his daughter while they were attending our church, and people. It finally came out years later, and the police were called, and then Chuck lawyered up, and then nothing happened. But I remember reaching out to a deacon at the church, and this was just a few years ago. I reached out to a deacon at the church and said, "Do you know anything about this?" And he's like, "Yes, I do." I was like, "Is it true that Chuck was molesting his daughter?" And these were his exact words, Jennifer. He said, "I don't know if I would go so far as to say molesting. She had been flirting with him for years. Now, she's 14 at the time. She had been flirting with him for years. And so finally he did do something to her, but she had been flirting with him and asking for it."
This is his daughter?
Hmm.
Oh my gosh. So nothing ever happened to him. The police were called, but no charges were pressed.
Police were called. He lawyered up. He refused to talk. The daughter, who had been traumatized, refused to talk. And the church refused to, because if they had told the cops just what they told me, he would have been, I mean, that would have been, I think, enough to at least do something. But the church, of course, kept their mouth shut too, their mouths shut, because they believed that they could restore somebody better than that person being in jail.
Yeah, so let's keep them in the church to where they can continue the abuse,
Yeah.
and let's rehab them
Yeah.
in the church while this just perpetuates.
Yeah.
This is the pattern that I keep trying to drill home to everyone, is that abuse in the church is not going to stop if this pattern continues. If it's not dealt with using the law, it's going to continue. And
Hmm.
so how many children have to be abused for this to stop? I mean,
Hmm.
this is just, it's terrible. And it's something that children are going to carry for the rest of their life into adulthood till they die. I mean, this is something that, it's a burden that they have to carry. It's trauma that they have to
Yeah.
unravel. A lot of them are so young at the time that the abuse occurs, they don't even understand what happens
No.
to them.
No.
It's terrible. And is this guy still at that church?
No, I don't even know where he is. It's funny. because in my situation, my pastor refused to turn in the family, that the woman who did what she did to me when they left the church. So when I found out about this, like I hounded on Chuck and Pam when they went from church to church, and then I lost track of it and stuff. But no, I don't even know where they are now.
And if this is too uncomfortable for you to talk about, then we don't have to. But if you don't mind, like you said that the person that abused you was your mother's best friend.
Yeah. And I don't even know. I mean, I call her. I wrote a book. This book I wrote, and I everybody in the book I changed the names because
Sure.
I didn't feel like it didn't really matter. I wasn't writing the book for anyone at Ann Arbor Baptist to read and be like, oh, I know. I wrote it because I truly believed that I truly wanted to help other people heal the way I thought that I was healing at the time.
Hmm.
So, but the one person that I did call out was the person that my abuser, because I felt like I don't know, I just did. So it was the Mathia family. They went through Faithway a lot and they were around a lot. So I don't know if you ever knew who they were, but it was Carolyn Mathia, the wife. She was one of my mom's closest friends, and she was married, three kids, maybe four kids, and in her 30s. And she began, and I didn't even realize this until she told me years later, but she began grooming me when I was 13 years old. And just simple things, just coming and sitting with me next to me after church and asking me questions about weightlifting or whatever I was doing and stuff. And so she was just a good friend. Nobody thought anything of it. It was right in the open. It was in the auditorium. Nobody thought anything of it or of her, because she wore the long dresses. She was the first one at the altar. She was in the nursery, in the choir, in the orchestra, submissive to her husband. Like nobody would ever thought anything of it. Plus, she was a woman, and women predators, they're more rare. I mean, obviously. And so from the time I was 13, she began grooming me. When I was 15 was the first sexual thing that happened. But then by the time I was 17, it was a full blown sexual abuse situation. And the most of it happened the summer I was 17. And when I say it culminated, or it got to a point to where, we didn't believe in divorce and remarriage, right?
Mhm.
And so she, when I say weird and sick and twisted, it just was because she did not want to, in the church's eyes, look bad, and she wanted us to get married and for me to help her raise her children, who weren't that much younger than me. But she had this fantasy where we would be married. And of course, she couldn't divorce her husband, Fred. And so she actually began asking me, like, do you know of ways to kill people? And she began plotting to murder her husband,
Oh my God.
so we could get married and be together, and I could help her raise her kids in a family, in a biblical, household and stuff. Yeah, it was bizarre. And I talk about it as if it's no big deal, but I've told my story thousands of times, and I couldn't even speak it out when I started to. Now I can talk it pretty thing. My heart still pounds, but it doesn't. I can tell it, but no, it was bad, and it was really sick and twisted. And so what happened was, that was when I was a junior in high school. Then I went through my senior year,
Now,
and
are you home? Are you homeschooling at this time?
homeschooling this
Okay,
entire
because your
time.
mom took you
Yep.
out of Faithway. So it's
Yep.
not like you were then isolated from your friends. You didn't have your friends anymore. We didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have
Yep.
cell phones. So it's not
Yep.
like you could call your buddy up and be like, WTF, this is what's going on. I don't know
Yep.
what to do. Help me.
Yep.
Like you're isolated. You're back to
Yep.
homeschool. You have no one. Okay.
Yeah, which is ironic, right, Jennifer? Because I was taken out of Faithway because of the negative influence. And then while I was being homeschooled, literally while I was being homeschooled during the year when my mom, like the first real big incident that happened when I was a junior, is that she called to talk to my mom, and my mom was out grocery shopping, and I was supposed to be home doing schoolwork. And she's like, "Oh, I had a dream about you." And I'm like, "Well, what?" what kind of a dream? And she's like, oh, I can't tell you, you're too young. And she kind of like teased me with it. And now remember, we didn't date. We didn't believe in,
Yeah,
they considered anything, we were taught that liking somebody was emotional impurity, thinking about them was mental impurity, and then any physical contact was physical impurity.
hmm,
So here I am, a 15, 16, 17-year-old guy that was not allowed to date, who felt guilty about even liking a girl, going through probably the biggest hormone changes of his life. And then all
sure.
of a sudden, this woman, twice my age, but still a woman, starts talking to me about this stuff. So obviously I was curious. So I started asking, and that one thing led to another, but that's how it started. And it was while I was supposed to be doing homework or schoolwork. My mom
Wow.
was out shopping. And then from that point on, it was phone calls, it was excuses to bring her kids over for a homeschool get together. I mean, it was all under, not all under the guise of homeschooling, but I tell people 90% of what took place between her and I was either in the same room as my parents, in the next room when my parents were in the next room, or on our property because I lived on a farm. So in our barn when her kids were in the same area, like it was never, there's a few times where it was like off site, but it usually happened right there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I know that, statistically with abuse, it's usually somebody that is very close with the family, if not a
Hmm.
family member.
Yep.
And so I think what parents who are listening need to understand is that this is not typically like a stranger danger type of situation where it's like a one off. I mean, that can happen, of course, but these are typically people who are close to the family or family members that will, in your case, proves that over a period of a long period of time, they're grooming the child to get used to certain conversations and then leading into actions and so on and so forth. And so kind of breaking down those boundaries in order to allow a child to feel comfortable enough to do something that they would otherwise do.
Yep.
And I think a lot of times we miss the grooming part of it when
Yes.
we're talking about abuse because it doesn't just 9 times out of 10 just happen in an instant. It's over a long period of time. And
Yep.
so that's why I tell people to really pay attention to who is taking an interest in your child. What
Yes.
adults are taking interest in your children?
Yep.
Are you seeing circumstances where your kid is being talked to after a sermon and in a pew, yeah, in a building where there's a ton of people, but yeah, why is this woman asking
Yep.
you if you work out and
Yep.
like what are you doing in your workout routine or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's where it starts. It's that innocent, if you will,
Yep.
and it just leads to other things. And
Yep.
we have to be hyper vigilant. And now with social media and you have, cell phones and everything now for kids to communicate with their teachers and their Sunday school teachers and, friends of family and family members, it's even probably easier to have these things happen, which is
Yeah.
scary.
No, I remember a couple of years ago when uh, I think Target started letting people use that, like transgender, whatever, that whole thing. And regardless of my opinion on any of that, I just remember a lot of conservative friends saying, if I ever see some transgender person walk into the women's bathroom, I'll punch him in the mouth because my daughter might be in there, and all that other stuff. And I remember posting and saying, you do that, I'm going to be watching the most innocent, kind person at my independent fundamental Baptist church, because that's the predator. Like
Mhm.
it's always the people. And
Absolutely.
I made a post one time of what people usually think is a predator.
So explain, Justin, what you're looking at.
Yeah, it's a picture of Hannibal Lecter series.
Yeah, you're talking about Silence of the Lambs?
Silence of the Lambs. Yeah, it's a picture
Yeah.
of Hannibal Lecter in his mask and everything like that. And that's what most people think of when they think of a predator.
Mhm.
And so here, I just sent it to you in a chat so you can see it too, but
Okay.
that's what most people think. And then
Mhm.
I actually took a picture off of Facebook of Carolyn and said that this is an actual predator. And I put that post, this was back several years ago, but I put that post and just people were shocked. Like it got shared like several hundred times and stuff because that's what you wouldn't think, you wouldn't look at this picture and think that this woman's a predator, but that's Carolyn Mathia.
So did you ever, so you did call her out by name?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
In my book and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I did.
And
Because,
so she's still in church, I'm assuming? She's
oh
still
yeah.
doing, okay.
Yeah, she's still in church. I actually found because like I said, when it all got caught, so I'll give you a little background there. When I was 19, I felt like I needed to come clean, unload the truck because I went to this cult college, right? And all they did was talk about how if God called you to be the if God calls you to be a pastor, don't stoop to be the president of the United States. So I felt this calling to the ministry, right? But I knew if I had this hidden sin, God wouldn't bless me and all that, or I believed that, right? And so I went back and told our pastor and about everything. And, I told him I told him what I felt like he needed to know to do something about it and nothing else. But then he started asking questions. And I'll never forget, I was at a big boy off of I-94 and he starts asking questions. He's like, well, was there ever physical contact? And I said, yes. He's like, above the waist or below the waist? And I was like, below. And he's like, in the front or in the back? And I'm like, both. He's like, in the pants or outside the pants? Like he started asking questions. And Jennifer, like that was how I was feeling is the look on your face. But
Wow.
my heart was pounding, my hands were shaking. And I told him enough to where I was like, you know what? Now you're just, I felt like he was kind of getting off on it. And so
Yeah.
I started lying because he was asking about oral sex. He was talking, and I was like, "That's none of your damn business." And so I just started lying and saying, "Nope, nope." And so he scored the blame 51% to 49%, giving the 2% to her because she was twice my age in her 30s and I was a minor at the time. But the 49% to me because I was not like a Joseph in the Bible. I could have fleed and ran. So that's how it was. And so then I had to go through church discipline and
Oh my
stuff.
gosh. Did they make you get up and confess it
No,
from,
they hid it because if they got up, they would have to
ugh,
report it to the authorities. So it was never reported, even though he was a mandated reporter even back then. He never reported it, so it was hush. But when I would say church disciplined, I was taken out of the choir, I was taken out of the Sunday school. I had to stand before her husband and read a letter of apology, apologizing to him for stealing his wife.
oh my gosh. Are you serious? And
Yeah,
what did she have to do?
she had to read a letter to my parents for I don't know what it was, but yeah, she had to. It was similar. That it was equal punishment. I had to get counseling with deacons. She had to get counseling with one of the deacons' wives, and so when they left the church shortly, because when they left the church shortly after that, they went to another church, and my dad was like, "Are you gonna?" He asked our pastor, "Are you gonna tell that pastor?" And he was like, "No," and so he never did. So when I started telling my story on Facebook and I started writing my book, I found out what church she was going to, and I reached out to the pastor, and he berated me for bringing up something that had already been dealt with in the past.
Wow.
So I blasted that church too. I used to do a lot of blasting several years ago because I was so angry and stuff. But I blasted that guy as well, and he threatened to sue me. And the reason I called her name out too, Jennifer, is I was so angry back then because I never got my. I was hearing all these opportunities. It's sad, but it was around the time that whole thing with Rachel Denhollander and who was that creep that the Eastern Michigan or Michigan State University thing going on, like all of that was happening. And so I was seeing all of these victims have their day in court. And again, that it's a horrible way to say that, but I was like, I never got an opportunity to confront her and stuff. So my secret hope was I'm going to say her name. And I even did a Google AdWords campaign at that church, so when anyone drove within a certain distance they would get a Google ad. I wanted someone to try to sue me for slander because I wanted an opportunity to say my thing, but it never happened. But yeah, I don't know why I got off and all that, but it was,
Wow.
yeah, when she left the church, it wasn't followed up with. And as far as I know, I haven't looked in years and years because I don't care as much, but she was still going to that same church.
And is that church in Michigan or?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll look it up because I don't even care. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's in somewhere in Michigan.
I think we should say the name of the church because we don't want people to go there,
No,
and we don't need any more victims of abuse in these churches. So I'm all about calling people out and calling the churches out for harboring abusers.
I'll keep looking as we're talking. But yeah, no, I mean, when he responded that way, I was like, well, clearly she found a great church to pray in because that like, yeah, it's crazy.
Unfortunately, that's more common than not, where, like we said earlier in the episode, where these churches will just harbor abusers and they oftentimes just brush it under the rug. They want to deal with it internally. They don't want a scandal. They don't want to deal with authorities coming in. And then the abuse just perpetuates. It just
Yep.
continues. And it's like, how many children have to be abused until it stops? I mean, it's just ridiculous. These are innocent kids who have no idea what
Hmm.
to do, or maybe even what's happening to them, and it's going to affect them for the rest of their life. Like, I don't understand why a pastor wouldn't report that. I really don't. Like, you're that high and mighty on your horse to say, oh, well, I can take care of this, I can rehab this person. It's like, no, you can't. There's a reason why prisons were created. People
Hmm.
need to sit and rot away in prison and think about what they did.
Yes.
I mean, even the women. And I just read a Google statistic that I found last week about abuse in church, and it said that it's actually more common for boys to be abused than girls in churches. Now, I didn't
Really.
specifically put Independent Fundamental Baptist Church.
Yep.
I
Yep.
just put churches.
Yep.
And so, of course, that would include the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church and the, Jehovah's Witness and all these other churches. But I thought that was a very interesting statistic. The other interesting part of it was that a lot of times boys and men will not come forward with abuse.
Yep.
I think because, again, there's that stigmatism attached to being a male. Like, you got to be tough, you can't talk about things, and you got to basically shove it down, and which is terrible that that is taught in society, not just in churches, but as in society as a whole teaches that. And so a lot of these guys that were abused as children in churches haven't even come forward with it because they're like, well, I don't want to even talk about it or deal with it because I'm supposed to just shove it down, which is unhealthy.
Every time I have stood up in a public setting or been on a podcast, someone will reach out, a man, and just, they have different ways of letting me know. I had one guy just come up and he couldn't even talk. He was shaking and he just said, "Me too." And he walked
Oh my
away.
gosh.
But every single time there's a male. So you're right. I know it's like in the broad term, women are more sexually abused than men, but there's a lot more men that are sexually abused by women, by other men, whatever. But men don't talk about it. So I kind of always say like I'm not an anomaly for having a story because there's so many men that do. I'm more of an anomaly for telling it, and it
Mhm.
hasn't come without a lot of mocking. I mean, I've gotten death threats from people who think just so many different things. I mean, because Hollywood even has kind of glamorized this sexual rite of passage for a man with a woman,
Mhm.
an older woman and stuff. And so, I was interviewed on a popular podcast one time and it got millions of views and it was on YouTube, and the comments that were on there were just crazy. So men don't like to talk about it, to your point, because it is more of a it's shameful regardless. There is no more shame for the man than it is a girl who's a victim. But there is this stigmatism that I think prevents guys from talking about it more or something.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, it's important to note you were abused by a woman. And so I think a lot of times people just automatically think, oh, he's probably abused by a man, which that can happen. But you were
Yep.
abused by a woman. And I'm actually hearing that quite a bit from other survivors that they
Yep.
were abused by women. Women can be abusers too, guys. Like in the church, outside the church, in the families, outside the family, it doesn't matter. Both men and women can be abusers. So put that out of your head if you're thinking like, oh well, whatever, and he was a teenage boy and she was a woman, and it probably wasn't that bad or whatever. It's traumatic and it is abuse no matter what gender abuse is. So I just want to make that clear. And there's actually people that, and I'm not going to name them by names because they haven't been on the podcast yet, but I had some people reach out to me that were victims of abuse within the Hiles Anderson College. And they were abused by their dorm supervisor. And she is pretty well known. And this woman is still out there. She's still out there. She isn't working in the college anymore, but she basically had free reign to abuse the girls over and over and over. She lived in the dormitory, like right under everyone's nose, right there,
Yep.
you know, doing the devotionals every night with the girls and then having certain ones come into her apartment afterwards.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And then you know what it's like being in this cult where you feel trapped and you feel like you can't, there's no one you can talk to because who would believe you? This
Right.
person is, involved in this ministry, like you said, she's a nursery worker, she's
That's
a
right.
submissive wife, she's in the choir, she's in the orchestra, she's doing all these things, she's very involved. And so it's oftentimes the person that everyone would think is the least likely to do it is the one who is doing it because they can
Yeah.
just hide in plain sight. No one would suspect a thing. And I don't know. I hope people listening to this will be hyper vigilant. If you're still attending a church, you need to realize, look at certain cues. If there's children who maybe are seem very shy or they don't really want to talk or they're not very social, a lot of times those are clues where kids will often shut down and close off,
Yes.
and
Yep.
they don't, because they don't want to talk or they don't want to look
Yep.
people in the eye. It doesn't mean because they're bad kids, it
Yep.
means they're probably being abused in some form, whether at home or in church or at school. And people need to be aware of these signs.
Yeah. No, I mean, what you just described, it was almost as if you knew me and we were still in touch when I was 18, 19. Was that, I mean, I became very closed and withdrawn. And again, to your point too, I couldn't talk to, so the only person I could talk to about it at the time was my best friend. And when I started to become withdrawn and quiet and angry, my parents thought it was because I was hanging out with my best friend. So I mean, I was 18 at the time now. They like separated us and we weren't allowed to ever hang out. So the only person I could actually talk to now, all of a sudden I couldn't talk to, which meant I had to start hanging out with my parents' friends all the time. And their number one friends at the time were the Mathia family. So even after the fact, I was like spending a lot of time with them. But no, I mean, you're 100% right. The kids that are withdrawn, closed, angry, there's something going on.
Yeah. So I'm interested to know, like, at what point did it end? Did you come forward? Did you bring it to your parents' attention? How did that happen?
Yeah. So when I was when I was 18, so it ended when I was a junior in high school. I was 17 still. And it feels so weird to say it. And I would stop anyone else from saying it because it's like, no, this wasn't what was going on. But it's just as I'm telling you, the way I felt at the time was I broke things off with her. And that's, again, that is the way I felt at the time. It's not the way I view it now, but back then, like after the whole, she started asking me to, she's like, do you know any good like poison recipes? And started talking that way. And then I don't know if you remember the Joshua family when Hannah Joshua died. Mr. Joshua was a teacher at Faithway
Yeah.
a couple times. So at her funeral, I reconnected with a friend that I hadn't seen in years. It was a girl, and she was a friend. And Carolyn was off in the distance. She was at the funeral, and she was watching this girl and I reconnect. And then she's like, "Hey, give me a call sometime." And she gave me her phone number. And so right after that, Carolyn came up and she's like, "What was that all about?" And I I talk about this more in my book, but I was like, "Oh yeah, she's just an old friend." She's like, "Well, what did she give you?" And I said her phone number. And she's like, "Oh, let me see." And so I gave it to her. It was on the back of an offering envelope, those yellow offering envelopes that we used to have. And she had torn it off and gave me her number. She took it and she crumpled it up and then she put it in her mouth and chewed it and swallowed it.
Oh my gosh, what a psycho.
Yes, yes. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "If you're with me, you're not going to be with any other woman." And so it was that type of stuff. And then talking about how, making wedding plans and killing her husband, like it was all that where it really freaked me out. And so I wound up saying, "Hey, I don't like, can we just be friends?" Again, which is so stupid. But I said, can we just be friends?" And she's like, "Yes, but if you ever repeat anything that has ever happened between us, I will lie. I will spread rumors about you, and nobody will believe me, or nobody will believe you because you're a rebellious teen. Everyone will believe me, so you better keep your mouth shut." And so that's when I was 17. When I was 18, I was living the worst year of hell, and it was killing me. I was living in this shame and all sorts of stuff. So I told my dad about it, but I made him promise not to tell anybody, and he didn't. And I don't know if he should have or not. I don't know. But I just know that I appreciated his keeping it to himself. But then I went to college, and when I went to college, she would constantly come to my parents and say, "Hey, I'd like Justin's email address so I can call and ask him, or I can write him and ask him how he's doing and how I can pray for him and stuff." And my dad knew, my mom didn't, but my dad, that was one of the times where he like laid down the law and was like, "Paula, do not give him Justin's email address." So my mom didn't. And so he eventually, I came home from break one time and she comes running up to me and says, "Justin, your dad won't give me your email address." And it was such a miserable time for me. And of course, I attributed it to this unconfessed sin. And so I came out and came forward with it and told my pastor because of all of that leading up to it. Plus, my dad called me one time and said, "Hey, she's starting to prey on other kids in the church, and I'm sure you wouldn't want to happen to them what happened to you, so you need to tell preacher about it." So I did.
And then preacher didn't do anything about it. Basically said you were she was 52%
Yeah,
culpable, you
yep,
were
exactly.
49%
Yep,
culpable, and you guys had to read letters to
yep.
your respective families.
Yeah,
Cool.
and yeah, yeah. She, he asked her about it and she did. I mean, she denied it at first, and then he came back and said, "If you don't tell me what happened, I'm going to make you meet with all the deacons." And so she finally said, "Yes, something happened, but it was all Justin. He came after me and he forced himself onto me and stuff." And so then he's like, "All right, let's schedule a meeting with the deacons." Then she's like, "No, no, no, no. It was all me." And then she admitted everything. But yeah, there is completely swept under the rug. What's really even messed up is that when I got out of college, after all that had happened, when I got out of college, I started teaching at Faithway, in the band room, and I was the choir teacher for a couple of years. And
Oh wow.
yeah, yeah, you probably didn't know that, but
I didn't
I
know that.
yeah,
No.
and that was fun. But as soon as Carolyn found out that I was the teacher, the high school choir teacher, she enrolled her son in at Faithway, and so I had to see her on a weekly basis at least at Faithway. So it was just this miserable time for me. But sorry to answer your question. Yeah, it got found out because I told my dad, and then he told me I needed to tell the pastor.
Wow. Well, I mean, at least your dad kind of protected you a little bit from her being able to communicate with you in college, and then he brought it to the pastor's attention, and
Yeah.
obviously we know where that went from there. But
Yep.
and unfortunately, she's still in church, guys. So,
Yeah, and I just found the church. So Jason Crawford, it's Mount Calvary Baptist Church.
where's that at? Do we
It
know?
is, yeah, it's in Ypsilanti in that area. So Jason Crawford, Mount Calvary of Van Buren,
Okay.
and I don't know what the address is, but it's Mount Calvary of Van Buren.
So the pastor over at Ann Arbor Baptist never contacted the Jason Crawford of Mount Calvary Baptist to
They
say,
actually they went to another church before Mount Calvary. They
okay,
moved around to different churches. By the way, they're on that KJV only church website.
of course they are.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Um,
Staying in the IFB lane
yeah.
there.
Yeah. E-course road. So yeah, E-course road, Mount Calvary of Van Buren, E-course road.
Okay.
And I don't know if she's still going there, but I wouldn't be caught dead sending my family there, because if
Yeah.
that's the way he reacted towards that, then yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to say, first of all, I applaud you for being able to tell your story, and not only to tell your story, but to write your story and to call out your abuser. That takes a lot of bravery and guts. And I appreciate you for doing that. And I'm sure anyone listening will as well. And so now let's talk about your book for a little bit to wrap up the episode. I would love to know the name of it
Yeah.
and tell us about it, and then where can we find it?
Yeah, for sure. So I started writing it in 2017. I had our first son, our first child, and I remember looking down at him in my arms and thinking I need to protect him, and then started thinking of all the times that I was not protected. And I,
Mm,
I had been, completely vulnerable and transparent, and it's all in the book. And if someone buys the book just to read the foreword by my wife, it's worth every cent. Which, by the way, I see none of, because I donate any proceeds, which are very few, because it's self-published and it all goes through Amazon and stuff. But I donate any proceeds to a nonprofit. But my wife wrote the foreword, but I had a not a good marriage for the first couple of years, because anytime my wife made any advances towards me in a physical or sexual way, I pushed her away. And I didn't
mm,
mean to, but I was having PTSD from all those years later, because again, never touched a woman, never kissed a woman, never dated a woman, never had any conversations about any of that. And then I went from that to Carolyn Mathia throwing me up against a wall and putting her tongue down my throat. The first time I ever kissed another woman was by a woman in her mid 30s, like putting her tongue in my mouth. And it was like, so anytime Emily did, when we were first married, like if she tried to hug me or kiss me or corner me or anything like that, I would push her away and freak out. And
mm,
she instantly blamed it on the abuse. I didn't see it as that. I thought I had moved on from it. But anyways, all those years later, we had our first son, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna write a book. And so I started writing the book, and Emily came up with the title because I talked about how sheltered I was growing up and how I was supposed to be protected from all the horrible things. And she's like, well, you were sheltered, but you weren't protected. And she's like, hey, that's the name of your book, Sheltered But Not Protected. So that is the name of the book. And I started it in
mm,
2017. I got to the point where I knew I could either air a bunch of people's dirty laundry, because I tell a lot of stories about Ann Arbor Baptist Church, about some of the physical abuse and some of the other bizarre stuff that happened. And so I knew as I wrote each chapter that I could either air people's dirty laundry, or I could write a book that hopefully would help somebody. And my heart was truly to help somebody. I didn't have an interest in airing dirty laundry, although I knew that would be a result, but that wasn't my why. And so I remember that I would pray before each chapter, because I never, I mean, even though I questioned a lot, never completely lost my relationship in what I believe about God, although it's completely, as I'm sure with you, it's completely different today. And so I would pray and just make sure that I wasn't bitter or angry. And like chapter one was about my family and stuff. And so I was like, no, I've moved on. Like my parents were good parents. Like they made mistakes, but they didn't do anything intentionally. And then there's chapter two about my pastor and stuff. So I did that. Well, I got to the chapter about Carolyn and I could not move on because I had not forgiven her. I was angry towards her. And at the time, I thought forgiving her was saying that it's okay. Hey, I'm sorry. Oh,
Mhm.
it's okay. And it wasn't okay to in any way, shape, or form. So I struggled with that. And one day we watched a movie. I forget what it's called, but it's when it was on Halloween and you could do one thing and get away with it. It was some horror movie. Emily and I watched it.
It wasn't
And
The Purge, was it?
yeah, yes, I think it was. Yeah,
Okay.
where you could do one thing on Halloween and you couldn't get in trouble or something. And so we were done. And this was right in the middle of writing the book. And Emily said, what would you do if there are no consequences for a day? And I won't even to this day say out loud what I said I would do to Carolyn, but it was horrible. Like it involved killing, murdering her, but it was involved so much more. And it shocked her and it shocked me even more, but I just remembered like struggling there. So long story short, there's a lot that happened. I talk about it in the book, but I eventually came to a place of realizing what forgiveness is and what forgiveness isn't. And my favorite definition of it is setting a prisoner free only to realize that you were that prisoner. And so when I saw it from that point of view, I was able to write the chapter, forgive and write the chapter. And so I published it, I think in 2022. And at that point, I came and it's on Amazon. I think there's a lot of different places that you can order, but the easiest place is on Amazon. You just type in sheltered but not protected, and there's only one book out there like that. In 2022, I came to this, I felt like a fork in the road because I had been posting on Facebook a lot and I saw a lot of people who were posting about abuse and it was this downward spiral. Like the more they talked about it, like they started getting health problems and it was so sad.
Mhm.
And I felt like I was just, in 2022, I was 40, 41, 42. I felt like I was in the prime of life and like I heard so much and I was afraid to do that. So I felt like I had come to this crossroads. And I remember driving into work one day and listening to a podcast. And the guy on the podcast said, stop making excuses for whatever you don't like in your life. If you're not where you are in your career, you can't blame it on your past. If you're not where you are in your marriage, stop blaming it on your past. Like, stop making excuses and take some responsibility. And then he says, I don't care if you were, I mean, he literally said this. I don't care if you were abused as a child. Quit using that as an excuse. Man
Mm.
up and take some responsibility. Listening to that, I was immediately reminded of a conversation I had with a close relative that when she found out that I was writing my book, she said, Justin, have you actually taken responsibility for your part in what happened? And I knew exactly what she meant. She was like, Pastor, preacher scored the blame 49%, 52%. Have you taken blame for that 49%? And my answer back then was like, nobody takes more blame for that situation than I do. Like, that's victim blaming and shaming. Like, victims feel that way enough, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so when I was listening to this podcast, when he said take responsibility, I started like, I had to pull my truck over and like I was angry and like thinking like what is all this? So I spent the next several months trying to find out the difference between blame and responsibility. And blame is all about the past, responsibility is all about the future. So at one point I just decided for myself, like, I don't know when I'm responsible. Like, is it when you're 17 and you can join the military? Is it 18 when you're old enough to vote? Is it when you're 21 and you're old enough to drink? Is it 25 when you're old enough to drive a car? Or as we were taught, is it when you become married? Now you're not underneath the umbrella of your parents anymore. You're whatever. So I made this point at that when I was 42, like I don't care about anything in the past. Like I don't know at what point I was responsible for what in my past. All I know is that from today on, I'm 100% responsible for every decision that I make. And that was like a line in the sand for me, and it's changed my life ever since. And there's so much I could say, but that some of that's towards the end of the book, not all of that. But yeah, I mean, life is so good, and it's not to say that I've completely healed. I think healing is not linear. It is messy and it goes all over the place. But that moment in 2022, when I decided to take responsibility not for my past but for my future, it changed everything for me.
I want to say first that I don't know your wife, but she sounds amazing
She is.
because she was able to say, Justin, you were the victim.
Hmm.
It wasn't your fault.
Hmm.
And you said she was the first person to ever say that to you.
First person.
And so I applaud her for that,
Yes.
to be able to show you were the victim here, not
Yes.
not the problem.
Yes.
So first and foremost, if you're listening and you've been abused as a child, you were the victim.
Yes.
It wasn't your fault.
Yes.
You didn't deserve anything that happened to you. And so I love the fact that you were able to take some time and then internally say, okay, there's a difference between blame and taking responsibility.
Yes.
You have to separate those two things, right? And
100%. Yeah.
to say, like, what do you like? I can't believe that your family member was like, oh, well, you need to own up to some of the things that you did within that situation. No, you don't. You were a child.
Right.
You
Right.
were being taken advantage of as a child.
Hmm. Yep.
Period. Full stop
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Period. Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, there's no question about that. The other thing I want to say is I love the fact that you brought up forgiveness, because this is something that I have struggled with myself. And I've talked about this before. There was a time where after my divorce, I got out of the IFB. That's when I left the IFB and didn't really look back. But my husband and I, when we got married, there was a period of time where I just started feeling this draw back to church. I
Hmm.
didn't really remember what was going on in our life at the time, but I just started feeling this draw back to church. And every church we went to was somebody knew who I was because of who my family is within the IFB,
Right.
my dad or my great grandfather, who was one of the founders of the IFB. And so it's like I couldn't escape it. Right. And so I'm like, I just want to start over fresh somewhere where nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows who my family is. Nobody knows my ex and the fact that I'm divorced and all of that. And I just couldn't escape it. Long story short, we ended up at this church. And it was great. The time that we were there, it was more of an IFB light church. That's what I like to call
Yeah.
it,
I love
where
that. Yeah.
women were allowed to wear pants and they had some newer songs that they would sing, not just hymns and so on and so forth. But he preached a sermon once about forgiveness. And he said, you cannot forgive unless you are asked for forgiveness by that person. So, just like Christ can't forgive you for your sins until you ask for forgiveness. Now, the whole concept is you have to be ready and willing to forgive that person if they ever do come to you. And that's sort of you letting go of that
Yeah. Yeah.
and giving that weight up and saying, whether they ever come to me and ask for forgiveness is not the point. The point
Hmm.
is I'm letting this go.
Yeah.
I'm letting go of
Yep.
this anger, this sadness, this bitterness, this resentfulness,
Yes.
this whatever it is that you're holding on to. You're letting it go for your own sake,
Yes.
not for
Yep.
that person's sake.
That's right. Yeah.
Because to hell with that person, to
Yes.
hell with your abuser.
Yes. Yes.
And yes, all the things, to hell
Yes.
with them.
Yes.
But for you, you're giving that up because you need to give that up for your own mental health, your own well-being, for
Hmm.
you as a father, for you as
Hmm.
a husband,
That's
for
right.
you as a person in society to be a better person. You got to give that up. You have
Yep.
to just say, like, I'm letting it go. I'm putting
Yep.
my story out there and I'm going to help other people. This is the thing that I always tell people. the best way to win over your abuser
Mm.
is to use what happened to you to help other people,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
hopefully help other people, either guide them through that, like that time period where they're trying to get healing, or you help other people realize, like, these are the warning signs, like, watch out for this kind of person.
That's right.
You're helping give people a guideline to say,
Yep.
like, this is what you need to avoid. And so that's how you win over your abuser. You help other people through the bad things that happened to you.
That's right.
And I just think it's great that you have been able to write this book, to come to this conclusion, to have this healing journey that you're on. And I say it's a journey all the time, because you really
Yes.
never arrive, right? You
That's
never.
right. No. Yeah.
Healing is a journey. You might have something that might still trigger you, or might still bring up those, like, visceral emotions where you're just like, you
Yep.
feel it,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And you're still working through that, but you're on this journey, and you're you're
Yes.
you're improving, and you're getting better every single day. And I just think that it's great that you're able to talk about it, that you're able to help other people. And yeah, I cannot wait to get your book and read it.
Yeah.
Definitely be doing that.
It's not a fun read, but it's an easy read. It's hard to put down because there's just so many bizarre things. And I always feel badly that people read about the unforgiveness on page whatever 130 and read about the forgiveness on 131 and think, man, it was so easy for you. What am I doing wrong? And it is. I cannot stress enough the months and months and months of struggling and nightmares and horrible thoughts and stuff. Like it was not as easy as it probably appears on one page and then the next page of a book, but it truly was. Like, it was destroying my marriage, it was destroying my relationship with my kids, it was destroying me. I weighed over 300 pounds, and I was binge
Mhm.
eating. Like, that's a thing. Like,
Yeah.
my drug of choice was food, and it just was not a good thing. So I was desperate for something, but it's not like it was just like, oh, it's not like I just read a quote one day and I was like, oh, now I forgive her. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that easy. So I don't want to ever come across that it was easy or that I've arrived either, because in full transparency, a couple of weeks ago, Emily, she cornered me to give me a kiss, and it wasn't even a sensual or anything. She just was leaving and she cornered me, and I immediately panicked, and then I was fine. So I've come a long way, but
Mhm.
it's not that like you forgive and then all of a sudden everything's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being transparent with us, because I will tell you, just from talking to other survivors, you're not alone in that. There's many people that I've had on here who struggle with very similar,
Hmm.
reactions with the PTSD and all that. It's a real thing, guys. And, unfortunately, in the IFB, we're taught, like, oh, if you have depression, if you have anxiety, if you have PTSD, that's all a spiritual problem. You must have, maybe not read enough scripture this week, or prayed hard enough, or whatever. And that's really, really terrible to tell somebody who has been traumatized, who has been victimized, that they have a spiritual problem because they're feeling these things. It's really messed up.
Hmm.
And the church has really done, I think, more harm than good, honestly, when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Agreed.
And I think definitely blasting them and exposing these people is something that we have to continue to do until it
Yeah.
stops. And I hope that it does stop one day, truly. But is there anything that you want to leave the listener with, if somebody's listening who maybe has been through a similar situation as you, or who maybe is currently in a situation, they're in the church, they're in the pew every Sunday, they're dealing with this, they don't know what to do, who to turn to? What advice would you give them?
I would say that you can't begin to heal till you get out of your abusive environment, first of all. So if somebody's listening and is in that type of environment and is even wondering if it's abusive, it probably is if you're wondering. And then it, everyone's healing journey is different. Like I said, when Emily said you're a victim for the first time, that was the first moment. The biggest moment was that responsibility, but everything that happened in between was part of it. Writing my story, putting it out there was healing for me. But I don't know of anybody that's ever been able to hold it in that has been able to heal. So whether it's a
Mhm.
therapist or what, they should talk to somebody and they should read other people's book. My book is for a specific group of people. I think they can relate to it. It was funny. Hiles Anderson type college, I forget, maybe Fairhaven in Indiana, a couple of years ago, they were actually passing my book out as a student. The white paper that used to go around our school books, they had
Mhm.
put my book in one of those white papers and they were passing it around, and people were leaving Fairhaven like crazy as a result of that.
You're kidding.
No, yeah, no, they were literally smuggling that book in,
Wow.
because people could relate to it.
Hmm.
But I guess the first thing I would say is you have to get out of your abusive environment. You can't heal until you're away from that. And then the second is get help. Talk to a therapist. Talk to a licensed therapist. Don't
Yes.
go to your pastor.
Yes. I always say that. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Um, yeah, those are the first two things, and then understand that healing is not linear. It's messy. It's
Mhm.
continuous. It's vulnerable. I love Brene Brown and her books that talk about
Oh,
being
good.
vulnerable. Reading books, that's another thing. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. That is
Hmm.
an unbelievably good book. Through that, I found out that I had gone from, because there's a whole part of my story that talks about the abuse that I suffered at the hands of my pastor after I came back and was the music director of the church. There's a whole lot there, but I went from one abusive relationship to another one, to one in Colorado for 14 years or 15 years. When I finally left that a year ago, um, I looked back and I'm like, yep, I went from one to another to another.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like sexually abusive. It was just abusive. You're in an environment where you're being mistreated on a daily basis and you think you deserve it. That's
Mm.
abuse, whether
Yeah.
it's sexual, physical, mental, emotional, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And so people might have thought, oh, yeah, I was in an abusive situation, but now I'm not. You might still be.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
crazy.
So maybe we should do a part two on that, because once I get your book, I'm going to read it and then I'm going to have more
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm pretty much an open book. So yeah, yeah. If you read it and have more questions, we can do a part two. Cause yeah, there is a lot more that happened.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think it's pretty common in the church to endure mental and emotional abuse at the hands of the pastor, especially if you're in
Yeah.
full-time ministry or you're working closely with the leadership in churches.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I am very well aware of all of that.
I'm
So
sure.
yeah, let's maybe do a part two on this.
Okay. Yeah.
After I get your book, I want to read it for sure.
Okay.
But I have one final question.
Yeah.
So where do you stand now with Christianity, with God? Are you still in church? Are you a believer still, or
Yeah.
no?
No, I am. But they talk about clinging faith, and it means a whole lot different thing. It means something completely different to me than it probably does to other. I mean, there were times where I was on the verge of being agnostic atheist because of so much. I mean, we have a son with severe autism, and that's the judgmental thing that I was going to eventually talk about. But that has changed our lives. But when we were finding out the diagnosis and stuff, and then I was reading the book or writing the book at the time, there's so much going on. So there were times where I was like, you better give me a really good reason to believe in you right now, because I'm right there. I'm right there. But I guess I've come to a place where I don't believe that going to church gets me any closer to God. I don't believe that I have found that the times that I'm alone driving in my car or in my office or talking to Emily, those are the times where I actually meet with God, not at church. It just is, it's different for me. So if we go to
Mhm.
church, it's because we want to, we choose to, not because we have to or feel obligated to. But that's where I'm at. And I've done a lot of deconstructing. I think I've done all the deconstructing I could possibly do. So I already know what I don't believe about God. And so Emily and I are on this journey now where we're just learning every day about who God is
Mm-hmm.
and being able to separate that from who we believed God was.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful journey. So I guess it's reconstructing instead of deconstructing, and
Yeah.
that's where we're at now. And I don't think that'll ever end because I believe that God is a God of infinite, like will always continue to learn and stuff. But the deconstruction had to happen, but we're not there anymore. We're in the reconstructing process, and that's I think that's more enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah. I'm in that same phase as you are, so I get
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's a lot more exciting learning about God in the real way than how we were taught, because, the way we were taught was essentially like just a means of control and fear.
yes,
So
yeah,
so yeah,
100%.
that's awesome. Well, Justin, thank you so much for coming on today. I
Yeah,
really appreciate it. And I cannot wait to get your book so that I can call you back up and we can schedule a part two for this. I
okay,
hope everyone listening enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye,
thanks.
everyone. Wait. Before you stop listening, I just have one thing to say. This is the boring part, guys. It's the legal jargon. Just wanted to make a disclaimer that anything you hear in this episode is all alleged. As you know, everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Although we do believe victims and we support survivors and believe their stories, we do have to be careful with accusing people. Thank you so much for listening.